Hello there, and welcome to the Rambling to Myself podcast. I'm your host, Aaron, and today we are in the music corner and we will be reviewing Green Day's latest record, Father of All Motherfuckers. As always, I'll start off by covering some of the tracks I have comments on and then move on to my final thoughts on the album as an overall conclusion. Timestamp on the screen if you want to just head straight into the full album review and you're not really too fussed about the songs one by one, so here you go. I am aware of the imagery the band has tried to put up along with all the ramblings on their social media posts, so I do have to note that I will be reviewing this album as its own product without talking about or considering all the weird marketing jargon and conspiracies of a better record existing somewhere. So without further ado, here we go. Father of All, first single of the album. Most people are kind of shocked that Billy took a falsetto route to singing, but I actually kind of liked it. On my first listen, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of the choice of electronic drum set they could have used, but they've kind of grown with me over time and I think it fits quite well. I think the song is a good indicator of what the trilogy could have sounded like if they used actual guitars, and I suppose that my favorite parts of the track is the constantly panning movements of everything from the solos to the harmonies to the bass. The song just feels very alive and in your face, and Mike is doing a phenomenal job on the bass. In spite of my initial issues with the compression and loudness of everything, I think it fits the album quite well, and my ears have, I suppose, kind of grown accustomed to it, but not a bad track at all. Fire, Ready, Aim. This track honestly really grew on me, and I really couldn't stand it on the first release of this song for obvious reasons, as at the release of this track, it seemed like this song was really nothing more than a song that was made for the sake of commercial release and for radio play. But over time, I picked up on a lot of the vocal and guitar work hidden behind the mix. The song really clicked with me when I saw them play it during the NHL free performance. I'm also a sucker for the sex organ keyboard sound they have that they used a lot in the Foxborough Hot Tubs, and the guitar harmonies starting from the second verse that follows the vocals also really helps with the energy and the general sound of the song. Oh yeah. The song sounds like a walk through a murky town with a touch of glitter, kinda like nightlife. Whilst there is nothing really offensive about the track, it is a little bland and leaves little to be discussed. Though I will have to add that this is probably one of the better slow tracks on the record in comparison to the other ones that come later down the record, as it does set the precedent in which the other songs will come to follow for better or for worse. But in all honesty, that's not really much of a compliment, seeing that it acts more of a catalyst rather than an exciting track that can stand on its own merits in a record made up of songs meant to really stand on their own. Meet Me on the Roof. One of the catchier tracks on the record, Meet Me on the Roof is pure rock and roll fun. The track fits quite well on the album, picking up the pace after the slowdown in Oh Yeah, with a nice, fun, bouncy track littered with fun little vocal harmonies that meets in the middle with the faster tracks on the record. For people who hated the singles, I'm sure that this was a real treat to listen to after the first track, as there's just so much more space and Billy's singing returns to a more familiar sound that people are more used to. I'm a little surprised that this song wasn't chosen as the lead single or as a single over Oh Yeah before the album's release, as I think the song far well represents the garage rock sound that the band was going for with this project by a big long shot. I was a teenager. There's some good vocal deliveries here and there, along with the choruses being somewhat reminiscent of Revolution Radio, but the song as a whole suffers from the same issues I had with Wild One from their previous album, Dose. While it's easy to sing along to and not as repetitive and dragged out as the song length is quite literally shorter, the 4-minute mark doesn't fare too well on an otherwise fast-paced record with catchy hooks and a reliance on energy. Sometimes I do get deceived into thinking the song is actually decent when starting it out on my replays of the album, but when the second verse hits, I'm just reminded of how dragged out this track actually is. Stab You in the Heart. Not sure how I feel about this one, though I will have to admit that my feelings are definitely leaning towards a positive one. Whilst I do like the way it sounds and the general energy the song has, I have to acknowledge the fact that it is a rehash of Fuck Time, except this time with an actual guitar tone. To add to that, let's not forget that the riff in Fuck Time itself was essentially the riff to the stereotypical blues rock cliche and jailhouse rock, so in a way the song kind of has a double rehash value that can't be ignored to it. Honestly, the whole song sounds kind of like Fuck Time with the songwriting quality of Makeup Party off of, again, the album Dose, with the screaming and all the crazy guitar solos here and there. Along with the added rising EDM effects here and there, the ending riff is very nice, and being able to hear Mike sing is always a treat as a fan, since Billy not only takes control of a lot of the lead vocals, but most of the backing vocals if you really pay attention to some of their latest releases. Sugar Youth. Looks like the band dug through their archives and found half a network song to convert into a Green Day song. The track picks up the pace once again, picking up from Stab You in the Heart and pushing the energy to new heights. Normally, given the bad track record of chipmunk song parodies and nightcore songs, I kinda hate the pitched up vocals, but I find them to fit actually quite well on the second verse of the song. It's a small nitpick of mine, but I do wish the guitars were mixed a little better, as from this point on the album, the guitars on the record just seem to take a dip in quality, with a big reliance on pure compressed volume rather than a quality of the guitar tone itself. Other than that, it's probably my personal favorite on record next to Meet Me on the Roof. Junkies on a High. Despite the length of the record, I feel this track has already started to repeat some of the elements of the record, as it does honestly feel like we've already heard this song in I Was a Teenager and Oh Yeah. And as far as enjoyment goes, this feels like a nice track to wave your arms to, but I don't really feel like this song fits too much with the general pace or the sound that the record's going for. The song tries to emulate the genre, pushing elements of Oh Yeah, but instead of using something that fits like glam rock, they resorted to R&B and pop elements of the 2000s, ringing the echoes of their song Nightlife once again in this weird fusion of garage rock and older pop. This track feels like a second road bump after the pickup in pace from the previous 4 songs, almost grinding the entire build-up and the flow of the record to a halt with a left field hook. And whilst this song is not inherently bad, it is a little bland and boring in context of listening to the album front to back. Take the Money and Crawl. I feel with the pace slowdown from Junkies on a High, the record really gets derailed to some extent. As a result, this song almost sounds slower than the rest of the songs on this record, despite carrying about the same feel. And unlike I Was a Teenager, there's really no space for another pickup in pace, as the last track is quite literally up next. It feels almost as though someone accidentally slammed the brakes on the previous track, and now I can't fully enjoy this song from the concussion and whiplash that I've experienced. And although a quarter of this song is an introduction to the track itself, I assume it's supposed to help me recover and come back up to speed. I'm just afraid that it's really not enough. Graffitier. This sounds like a song you would hear at the end of a summer high school movie where everyone is kind of celebrating, throwing their hats at graduation. I don't really know how to feel about pure garage rock album ending with an literal ending to a possible 90s sitcom. And for comparison, whilst Muse had Revolt off their record Drones, which fits this weird theme song atmosphere, at least the cheesiness felt somewhat warranted and in line with the themes of the record and sounded somewhat good. Here the guitars sound like they're on the verge of going over the volume threshold when they're in the picture, almost clipping over. And not to blame this track specifically, but the slowdown in pace with an almost baroque rock track also doesn't really help this song stand out as a real wrap up to the record as a whole, forcing it to stick out like a sore thumb in an otherwise punch you in the face record. If anything, this track reminds me of those times in the trilogy where each song ended as more of a what's to come next rather than an actual ending. As such, this track feels more like a good B-side that is tossed at the end of the record whenever you bought the Japanese version of an album, rather than an actual satisfying end to the record itself. All in all, the band has taken a huge step into other rock genres with this record, experimenting the formulas in garage rock and roll with touches of the sounds in their previous side projects, rather than following their track record of pumping out pop punk songs within the trilogy or rehashing their older sounds which are familiar to the fans, like in Revolution Radio. In a sense, it's kind of the polar opposite of what Warning did, whilst maintaining that level of experimenting by heading towards a louder garage rock sound rather than a softer marching parade acoustic sound. Although I do have my long history of grievances with electronic drums, I feel they managed to blend pretty well on this record, with the overblown production of everything kind of covering up in a sense. In essence, the record is loud, but does not carry over the same mistakes that they made in Revolution Radio with the huge discrepancies in volume, such as the obvious track of Outlaws with the jarring shift from verse to chorus. Though I will note that Billy's vocals can get a little soft and buried in the mix at certain tracks and times. I have noticed a lot of comments on the blatant overuse of claps throughout the record, and whilst I do agree to some extent, I personally feel they don't intrude so much that I would find it a really grating and prevalent element that ruins all the songs and destroys them completely. To me, it's just kind of there in the background. I also do like the added touches here and there for all the songs, and despite the record generally being kind of straightforward with the rock songs, the band does a great job of spicing things up by tossing in some guitar works and vocal harmonies and bass lines that just come in and out here and there. And whilst the highs of the records are definitely really fun to listen and sing to, on a high energy, short record like this, the softer tracks unfortunately just suffer a lot and do cause a bit of issues in terms of the album pacing, as evident in the tracks of Oh Yeah, I Was a Teenager and Junkies on High, as I've explained. There's a lot of flip-flopping between the pace of the record, and having these slowdowns doesn't serve the album too well, making these tracks appear as more of abrupt road bumps rather than breathing space for the listener to calm down and be ready for another track again. Similar to the issues of bad tracks derailing the record that I have with Uno and the Long Shot record, I do feel as a result, the last two tracks do suffer a bit, despite there being potential for me to grow to like them. I felt if they really wanted to have fully embraced the garage rock theme of the record, stemming from the Foxborough Hot Tubs and the Long Shot, trying to fit the slower pieces into segments of songs or leaving them out completely rather than making them individual tracks would have served the album better in terms of flow, seeing that in the interviews they did mention that they had like about 20 songs or something written. These were the 10 songs that they chose. I'm also left a bit confused as to the direction of the album, as the band seemingly curated this album based around sounds they just thought, hey, this kind of sounded good, when they were jamming along to covers of songs and bands they listened to in the past. It almost feels as if they kind of just decided to toss them together in this soup of a record and just released it. And as such, I feel the band could have done a better job by following a single direction to release a more concise and direct album, rather than trying to branch out with too many attempts at a new genre that falls kind of flat as a full record despite being at a minuscule 26-minute length due to the messy wrap-up that the album has. Though I will admit, if this was a second Long Shot record, I feel my reception would have been a lot warmer, as in that position it would have been Billy's solo passion project and endeavor. But in this situation, when there's a band backing the record with the experience that they have, I do feel the record is not really much more than neat little, hey, here's some songs we threw together while practicing one night, have a listen. At best, this record seems to be a step backwards towards improving where the trilogy left off, with the attitude of, let's put some music out and just see what works. Almost like raising the ashes of Demolicious, where instead of clean guitar tones, they brought back an actual guitar tone that fits the rock genre, or an attempt at releasing a second, more exciting Foxborough Hot Tubs record under the Green Day name. On the plus, at least the band is having fun and is finally taking steps in a new direction, which I suppose is a nice sentiment to consider. And to end off, I suppose I should introduce some sort of a scoring system, since, you know, music critics love to score it, and I suppose people do want to know how I rank this album. So, disclaimer that my scores are constantly changing, and you can find them on my Album of the Year account, which will be on the screen. But as of the time of this review, my final score for this record is about a 67 to a 73 out of 100. And that is about all there is from me for now. Do let me know what you guys thought about the album in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.